Now the new iPad's good as long as the technology actually works. Just a, yeah. Oh no, just a simple click on the top black bit. Who's got a new Apple box? Nice new remote on them. I'll move on anyway while we'll get the technology going. Good morning. I'm very excited to be here, and one of the main reasons that I'm excited to be here is because, as Steve said, we met in a room about 6 years ago where we were both at the opposite. So I was sitting with where you guys are sitting. So I'm delighted to be standing in Steve's room. So thank you very much for having me, Steve. And thank you and well done to you guys for showing up, because I think Steve was saying with some of the other events that he has throughout the year, they get bigger turnouts. And I think the reason that bigger turnouts happen when it's something like sales and marketing or technology based is I need to learn something for the business. So it's very easy to show up when we're showing up for something outside of ourselves. But when the event is showing up to learn about yourself, a lot of people go, I'm okay, like I just need to learn more external stuff. And I was very much that person when I was sitting in these rooms. And I used to think I just need to know something extra, and I just need to know a little bit more. And it took me a number of years to work out that I just needed to shift a little bit more within myself, and then some of the wonderful information that was coming in from outside would be more useful to me. So if I get my technology going. So to share a little bit about that journey, just so that you have an idea of who I am and where I come from. I have an engineering background, and then that went into a finance background, and I had a business that was doing okay, but I felt like I could do a lot better. Question, does anyone feel like they could do a little bit better in their business? Is that someone in the room? Okay, wonderful. So I showed up to these events looking to expand myself, looking to do well, looking to learn new information, and after every event like this, I went home inspired and ready to do something different. And I'm wondering if you've all had that experience as well. Would that be correct? You go home, you learn something new, and you're ready to implement. And if you're anything like I was, some of it stuck really well, and I got home and I implemented, and the business improved. But after a couple of years of doing courses like this, I found that I started to plateau. And a lot of people around me plateaued, but some didn't. Some people took the same information that I was hearing, and they had a business that was potentially smaller than mine at the start, but within a couple of years they were well ahead of me, and they just skyrocketed past the growth that I had. Has anyone sat in the room and just gone, wow, that person across the way, they're amazing, and just wondered what they were doing? Has anyone been that person? Is there one of those people in this room where it just, you get into this course and it's just you're hearing the information and you're ready to explode? Has anyone had that experience? Great. May I ask your name? Phil. Welcome, Phil, and good job. Talk to me about your experience. What's yours? Wonderful. So perfect example of when someone really gets something. And I guess that's what I'm looking to share with you today. It's the ability to not just hear information and think about it, but really know when you get information. So it's a very physical experience to start to understand. So I said I did engineering in my background, so I have a smart mind, but a smart mind doesn't actually lead to a good business. What leads to a good business is a fully connected person, a person who thinks and feels into their business, because your business is a reflection of you. And I've got up here that your thinking level determines your income level. Your thinking level also determines your happiness levels at home, your success levels with regards to your friends, and just how you feel within yourself. So low thinking level will be low feelings within self. Shift those feelings within yourself, and you will shift your business and everything around you. I'm interested to hear how you're relating to this, so just chat to the team members on your table, team members, participants. What are you hearing? What's resonating for you? And one person from each group. Point to the person who's got the most profound thing to say, and we'll hear from a few of you. over to you guys. Have a chat with your table. Okay, what have we got? Point to the person on the table who said the most profound thing. If you've been pointed to. Thank you. What have we got over in the back table? What are you hearing? Wonderful. Who's had that experience where your energy infects the whole team? It happens all the time. There's a wonderful saying, the fish stinks from the head down. Or, I'm sure there's an equal and opposite positive saying, but I don't know it. I only know the negative one. So thank you. Okay, so your mindset expands or limits your team as well. So it's when you're the business owner, it's not just you. What else have we got? We've got some other profound words on another table. Oh, Steve's got a mic. Margaret, thank you.
Starts looking at his business at 6 a.m. I was remarking that on breakfast television this morning they were talking about the sleeplessness epidemic that we suffer now in Australia, and that how we're just all engaged and on 24/7, and you know you can be engaged in your business from 6 a.m. through to 11 o'clock or later at night. And then when you try to go to bed, you're still in your business. And yes, you can probably think too much.
Great. I love that. Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Margaret, for sharing the words. So it's a bit like a codependency thing. There's me and there's the business, and we sort of get entwined with the business such that the business is with us whether we like the business or not. Do you know, sometimes it's like, can you get out of my bed? Do you know, like you don't actually need to sleep with me. So once again, it comes down to our thinking as to how well we can separate ourselves from the business and be present to ourselves and then be present to the business when we need to be. And once again, if we're always thinking, it can be hard to find that line, but when we start to notice how we feel, and we'll be going into that in a couple of levels. So the first session is going to be a little bit lighter, so you can box yourself into a couple of categories. Where do I sit? And we're going to look at how you do a couple of levels of thinking functionally and dysfunctionally. And when I talk about boxing ourselves, I'm going to ask you to box yourself very lightly. Who's ever found themselves to be in a category and gone, oh, that's me, and then held on to that category with fervour going, this is the best corner to be standing in because all those other guys really don't know about life. Has anyone done that? That was me. I was very good at that, do you know? But what I've realised is no particular level is better than any other level. It's just which level do I do least well these days and how would I like to improve that, and which level do I do best and how can I use that to improve my thinking in other ways. Okay, so we'll go into that in a minute. One more table. Has anyone else got something that they feel would be good to share with the group? Thank you. Sorry, Steve.
About them coming on the journey. So even though I'm flat out full speed, not everyone is the same as me, and people think and determine and understand things different to me. So it's about making sure that I don't affect my way on them as long as we get to the outcome. I think that's the most important thing, but it's about them coming on the journey and understanding.
Great. So I missed your name. Kylie. Thank you, Kylie. I think you'll like the second session, and in particular the concept of how important it is and how much energy there is in the feeling aspect of ourselves. So once again, I'm very into my thinking and I love thinking, but if we don't connect to the feeling, then we miss a lot of the energy. So with our team, we want all of them, not just their brain or their heart. We want their brains and their hearts to show up at work such that they can power the business along with us. So we'll be looking at doing that. And to engage your team like that, you actually need to be able to engage yourself. So today, there can be the idea of thinking about everyone around you, and we will do that on occasions, but we will only go to look and think about someone else such that then we can flip it back and become more aware of ourselves. When you can connect to yourself and inspire yourself, and you know consciously how you're doing that and why you're doing it, a lot of very driven people are just naturally driven. They don't know why they're driven. And when they suddenly stop being driven, they don't know why they've stopped. So we want to get some conscious awareness over what gets you up and what drives you. And once you understand that, you can help to encourage that in those that you work with. Sound like a plan? Okay. So, when it comes to business, if we're looking at the... I'm sorry, I didn't put my slides in the book. So there's separate pieces of paper. There's staple papers which have this on it. When it comes to business, the concept of business is not that complex. We all have a basic strategy. So if you write that word across your circle, and here's the exciting part of the iPad, we all have a basic strategy to our business. It could be to sell coffee, to make widgets, to do XYZ service. And we bring to that the skills of ourselves and also the skills of our team. Where the two overlap, theoretically there's potential for profit. And in business, the profit is pretty obvious. It's cash in the bank. So the thing I like about business is it's a very clean measure of feedback for us. You either have cash in the bank or you don't. And when we start in business, what I like about business is we all start with an idea, and it's just a little seedling, and we grow it a little bit. And there are some people who are able to grow full-on oak trees with the same strategy and very similar skill set. So what are some of the businesses we've got here? We've got some IT businesses. If you can yell out what business we're in. What business? Demolition, great. The knocking down business, okay. What else have we got? HR, okay, and accounting, great. Disability services, wonderful. So some very community-minded people here, wonderful. Music, great. So in all your industries, can you think of, whether your industry has been stated or not, can you think of someone who's taken your industry and made a very big business out of the work that you do? Or at least a very solid business. So there's someone who's taken a basic strategy, very similar to what you've got, and they've made a big tree out of it. And then you look at where you are and go, okay, there's a difference there. It's generally not the skills. You're as skillful as they are. In fact, quite often your skills will be better than the person who's grown a big business. But their strategy is similar. Sell good service to people who want the service. But one person makes money and the other person doesn't make as much as I would like. So the difference is the mindset of the individual who is running the business and also the mindset of the team members. But before we point to our team members, we'll go back to the fish stinks from the head down. The team members who work with you can only be as expansive in their thinking as you are. Okay? Because if they have great ideas and you're a limited thinker, you will naturally cut their ideas down back to fit within your scheme of thinking. Expand your thinking and you expand your ability to access profit. Yeah? So if you can expand your thinking gradually and move it out, then you expand your ability to access more of that potential profit. Enough theory, talk to your team, your table, and tell me what are you hearing. I like to get feedback, otherwise I can go on down my own rabbit hole, so let's stick together. So have a chat to your table, what are you hearing? And come back to me in about 30 seconds. So quick chat. Okay, general consensus. Are we on board? Do we have any questions? Have I got nods for on board? Shoulders for questions? It's stuck to my hand. No, not really. It's freaking you out a bit? Sorry. It's that nervous energy. It's like a magnet. How have we got? Are we on board? Do we understand the importance of mindset? It's really important to me that you... Great. So Phil's got a great comment here about the phone, in that the phone used to be just a phone and now it has everything in it. So if you haven't been able to evolve with the times and work with the phone and all that it can deliver us, then it's easy to get left behind. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, actually, people get distracted on a phone, so there's negatives to a phone. So it's not about, it's about being able to bring in the new technology and use the best of it. Yeah? And that requires us to be continuously evolving in our mindset. And with artificial intelligence and those sorts of things coming into the world, we need to be, once again, be able to learn and grow. So the second session is very much about how to know when you're learning quickly. But before that, we're just going to get into some of the basics about mindset. Now, the other good thing about this model, the mindset profit model, is when you shift your thinking for your business, you also shift your thinking for your personal life. Because at the end of the day, that's why we're in business. It's to have a better life for ourselves, for our family, and also to contribute to other people's lives so that they improve too. If we look at our personal life, we all have a strategy. And the strategy could be, the most common one is to get married, have a couple of kids, buy a house and maybe an investment property and pay them all off and live happily ever after. Has anyone heard of someone who runs that strategy as a basic general rule? Okay, I've run it myself. We bring to that the skills that our parents taught us in our personal life, and also the skills we learn along the way. Sometimes we might look at our parents and go, I'm going to do the exact opposite. So our parents will define what we won't do and what we will do, and we might also try to learn some things along the way. Where the two overlap, the profit in terms of our personal life is many different things. It's happiness, it's love, it's that feeling of energy, it's that feeling of being able to go through the day feeling relaxed, that Zen-like state. And it's also, and I think this is one of the most important ones, it's that feeling of, have I achieved all I feel that I'm capable of achieving? And that's a real inner sense. No one else can judge that for you. It's, am I all that I felt that I would be and could be by this point in my life? And it's this one, for me, that was a driver. I had someone tell me when I was in my early 20s, and I feel very lucky that this was the case. They told me that my mindset was limited. I was a very smart person. And this person I'd spent a day in the room with him. Brad Sugars was his name. You've probably likely heard of him. And he watched me play a board game, and I got into the last round in a room full of 200 people. And I was starting to lose the board game. And it was a game where there's a fair bit of luck involved. And one of the guys was actually rolling the dice and counting how many squares had to happen. And the number of times that he rolled the right numbers on the die, I was just stunned. And I was like, it wasn't within my sphere of belief that someone could deliberately roll dice. Now, it still may not be within my sphere of belief, but I'm much more open to the concept that it could be true. And Brad watched me as I played that game and as I watched the dice not roll in my favour, and he could see who I was. I didn't realise it at the time, but looking back, he could see right through all my strategies, my frustration, my desire to blame when things weren't quite going my way. So when he told me that my mindset was limited, it was one of the best things he could have done. It took me 15 years to work out how to stop limiting myself. But what we do now is basically we have a logical process that helps you stop limiting yourself. Because only you know when you're limiting yourself. Someone else can tell you, but until you actually know that you're limiting yourself, nothing's going to shift. Until you go, I want to move, nothing's going to shift. I was talking to a guy just a couple of weekends ago, some relative of a relative, and he asked me what I did. I said mindset work, and he said, I showed up in lots of rooms. I'm like, great, how did your life shift? And he said, well, I just like showing up to them. And I was like, well, what was your thinking in just showing up? And he's like, well, no one around me was learning and growing. So I didn't want to learn or grow either because I was a bit afraid that I would grow away from them. Who's ever had that fear? If I keep learning and growing, I'll grow away from a loved one. Do you know? And it might see me. If it's not a conscious one, it'll be an unconscious issue. Often when you go home, the other half you'll be all pumped up and the other half's not quite there with you. So a gap can develop. Yeah. And I said to this guy, just because, with mindset, it's a really interesting thing, just because you understand A and you know A, if I show you B, C, and D, you can actually come out and you can feel and experience B, C, and D, but A is always still available. You can always still shut down and go back to your old way of being. Yeah, so can I say for the certainly for this session and also for the next 3 sessions, be willing to feel into and embrace every single idea. And if you feel yourself rejecting an idea, who knows when they hear themselves going, oh, I already know that. So that's a rejection. It's a rejection of understanding the idea at a deeper level. Or you go, oh, this feels wrong for me. That's a rejection as well. So if you find yourself doing that, I encourage you to feel into the idea or nicely and pleasantly ask a question so that you can understand how can someone else believe that that's to be true. Now, you still may disagree with them, but at least you'll get clear on why you disagree and you get clearer about who you are and why you're that. And you might check with some of the other participants if they've enjoyed the session and go, how do you reconcile this issue? Like, I want to try and see if I can get to C, B, C, and D myself and understand that way of being. So, expansive thinking, it'll profit your business, it'll benefit your business, and it'll also benefit your personal life. Doesn't matter where you expand your thinking, it improves every aspect of your life. Who's a bit excited about that? I am, yeah. And it means you can also work on whatever your area you like and it'll benefit. So you can go and work on your relationship if that's easier for you, and it will help out in business. Why? Because a relationship with a significant other affects all the relationships in your life. Or you can go and work with your team members if that's more comfortable and easier for you, and that will help you at home as well. Good? Okay, so expand your thinking, expand your results. This is probably the side that I'd like to focus on there. Good? Yes, Phil. Who else does that? Who else tries the car parking thing out? Thank you, Phil. I love that. And with a numbers background, I like to read a book called Freakonomics. Has anyone ever read the book Freakonomics? No. So Freakonomics tells you what statistically is improved based on, like, is the belief true or not? And I too always find car parks, and I sort of feel into that belief of there'll be a car park there. But I think that for me, personally, maybe not for you, but for me, I get a car park far more often because I'm actually driving to look for one in the first lane. Who doesn't even bother looking? Do you know if you don't bother looking, you can be guaranteed you're not going to get one of the early car parks. So it's just sometimes being willing to be open to the opportunity being there. Yeah, and so for the more logical, but I agree with you as well. Yeah. Okay, so mindset evolution scale. We're going to go through, and you've got it on your in your page. We're going to go through 7 levels of thinking. There's dogmatic thinking. The thinking is basically goes from being more rigid up to more free-flowing. So there's dogmatic, diligent, determined. They're very logical types of thinking. Diagnostic is also in the logical bandwagon. And then we come up to embracive, expansive, and evolved. Now, I wouldn't mind getting a bit of a feel for the room. So can I ask you to put your hand up for one of these 2 things? I'm going to ask you to put your hand up if you're a thinker, if you consider yourself to be more a thinker than a feeler. So if you're a feeler, keep your hand... Actually, no, the feelers are more likely to assist me. Can the feelers look after me, please? Put your hand up if you consider yourself to be more a feeler than a thinker. Feelers in the room. Good. So we noticed that a number of the feelers have already spoken. Thank you. I might not have picked you as a feeler. Quiet one. Thank you. What's your name? I've got you now, Johnny. So the interesting thing about thinkers and feelers is we come from different paradigms. So I used to very much be a thinker, and I certainly would never have wanted to put my hand up as being a feeler. That would have been my worst nightmare. But now if I was in the room, in your seats, I would put my hand up as being a feeler, knowing that thinking is there for me. So if you're a thinker, your job over the next couple of hours is to really listen for the importance of feeling. So as a thinker, you're effectively using 3% of your power, your thinking power. So good job getting as far as you have using just 3%. So if you add to that the feeling aspect, then you've got enormous power at your disposal. And for the feelers in the room, good job getting as far as you have done, using primarily your feeling, because that's what you would mark yourself as. Improve your thinking just slightly, such that you can look after your feelings even more so, and you'll find you have more energy, more drive, and more certainty. So someone earlier today said they were looking for confidence. Confidence comes when thinking and feeling work well together. Okay? Anxiety, overwhelm, any of those negative emotions is when your internal feeling and thinking are not looking after each other. Either the feeling is overriding the thinking, or the thinking is shutting the feeling down. So what I'm saying resonating. Can I have nods of heads? I've got lots of... Is that making sense? Good. Okay. But just to get into these 7 basic levels, when you understand these levels of thinking, I would like you to gradually work out which level you over-rely on and use well, and which levels you don't use so well. So we're going to work together as a team over the next hour or so, 45 minutes. There's a page after that second page, and this is where I'd like you to put your answers, but only after you've had a bit of a chat to your table, okay? We're going to go through each level, and as we go through each level, we're going to work out what's a functional way to work with this level and what's a dysfunctional way. We might actually talk about the dysfunctional first, because it's easy to see the dysfunctional ways a level of thinking can be used, and then we'll consider the functional aspect. So when it comes to mindset, the lowest, most inflexible level of thinking is a dogmatic thinking style. Now, it's pretty obvious with a dogmatic thinking person. They're the person who feels that you can't teach old dog new tricks, which used to be a very popular saying. Neuroscience now suggests that it's totally incorrect. Not to say that a dogmatic thinker is going to change their mind about whether or not it's correct. At its best, dogmatic thinking is a very linear, very focused style of thinking. So when you're in business, you've got a vision, you can see how the stars align, and you just focus on it and you head down that track, and you bring people on board to assist you to get to the goal. You're all here in the room today, so you're all doing well enough and focused well enough to be present to your business. So I'm going to say you've all got a good streak of dogmatic thinking in you. The negative side of a dogmatic thinker is that they generally drive people around them nuts. So if you've got a dogmatic team member, they're the worst kind. You tell them how to do it and they say yes, and they do it their way. Anyone got dogmatic thinkers in their team? If you've got a successful dogmatic person, then they're very successful while the stars are aligned. If the external environment changes, so if something outside of in their either the industry or new technology comes through, often very successful dogmatic thinkers won't be able to shift as quickly as they need to. They'll be stuck in the past and people will overcome them. So Nokia is a perfect example of a company that must have been headed by a relatively dogmatic thinker. Nah, we'll be right. And they stay on their track without realising that the things in the external environment have changed. Kodak's another one, the classics, hey? Steve Jobs is an example of someone who used dogmatic thinking well. He stood firmly until he felt that the stars had changed, then he let go, and he would have used the other thinking levels until he could find something that he wanted to stand firmly on again. So the trick to dogmatic thinking is to know when to hold the thinking and to know when to let go of it. We do a lot of one-to-one work. It's the primary work that I do, and I would say some of my favourite clients are dogmatic clients. And the reason for that is someone who's become successful through dogmatic thinking is really willing to work. You've got to work hard if you're a dogmatic thinker, because you've got to constantly be bringing people onto your page. You're not flexible at all. You're just ramming people onto the same line. Yes, there's a fair element of narcissism. But yes, not necessarily. The opposite of a narcissist is an echo, so someone who panders to the narcissist, and an echo can be just as dogmatic in that I have to serve, which is, once again, no good when it comes to business. You need a balance. So I'm interested for you on each of your tables to come up with some of the ways that you are dysfunctionally dogmatic, okay? Personally, and you can talk about other people. You don't have to talk about ourselves, but the idea is that you have a bit of a discussion around the table, then we'll come and bring the rest of the room in so you can get some more ideas, and I want you to be able to then write down how are you dysfunctionally dogmatic. Okay, so have a chat on the table. Doesn't have to be you to start with. Talk about the dogmatic type of thinking that you've seen? What does it look like in your world? If you need some questions. Now, I can't hear any of your conversations, but it is coming up in my thinking that if anyone thinks that they're not dogmatic, you're way more dogmatic than you think you are. Now, I'm interested in your thoughts. What have we come up with? The table in the middle at the back, what sort of things have we come up with? Dysfunctional dogmatism. Is anyone willing to own their own dysfunctional dogmatism? Great. Wonderful. So what I hear you saying there, permission to speak freely, is when, and pressure is a wonderful thing. Pressure shows us who we are. So who we are under pressure shows our core underlying thinking strategy. So good job owning that when the pressure's on, you just literally bunker down and hold the line of thought. Yep. So great. Thank you. What else have we got? Great. I have heard that teachers are one of the toughest audiences to speak in front of, and I have experienced that myself. So yes, there is an element of teachers that can be very dogmatic. And I do believe that there are some industries that are more naturally, obviously dogmatic. It doesn't mean that other industries aren't, but the logical industries, so the finance industries, banking, engineering, much more logical, and the more intelligent an individual is, the harder it is to pin how they're specifically dogmatic, because they'll be able to argue around their point very well. Okay, so some people are able to hide their dogmatism very well, which was me. So a lot of the work that we do, it's to work with the me's of the world, and if you can work with the me's of the world, pretty much anyone else is good to go, and that's because I could always argue my point of view. I can always justify my stance, and that's a very good sign of dogmatism. Guys in the back, what have we got over there? Good. I love it. And that, look, yes, it's dysfunctional, and there's an element of functionalness to it, because if you back your decision, you'll learn either way. But who's ever done that? Gone to a course or paid for a consultant to come and help you, and then gone, going to do it my way anyway. Yep. Good. Good job, Phil. I can hear you owning that dysfunctional dogmatism, yeah? Good. One more from over this. How did we go over this, at this table? Good. Great. Okay, so it's not a strong suit of yours. Wonderful. So you'll see yourselves perhaps in the higher levels of, I'm going to say diligence. Often if you're not dogmatic, if you don't have a strong streak of dogmatic, there's a diligence that comes into it. Thank you. Great. So it's a backstop, yeah? It doesn't... That's an interesting comment. I've never heard someone explain it like that, but I like that. It's sort of the brace yourself, because I'm not saying this specifically, but it's a bit of a lazy default. When you've got no other energy, you can drop back down to... No, but some people will be lazy, so lazy people will be dogmatic. But you're saying it's tiredness that'll take you there. Great. That sounds like functional. That sounds like functional dogmatism, which is where we're going to now. So thank you for the, whatever that's called, segue. Let's have a chat about functional dogmatism. Where do we do functional dogmatism in our life? And for those guys who aren't naturally dogmatic, I want you to look for where you actually do have, we all use all thinking levels. We mightn't be as strong as we'd like, but if you can find the aspects where we do sometimes do it. So to give you a bit of a hint here, sometimes people will use anger in order to get to functional dogmatism. Yeah, so sometimes when people push my buttons too far, then I will bring that dogmatic streak out. For those of you who naturally and easily do it, have fun finding, discussing how it benefits you. Yeah? How does dogmatism benefit you? Over to you guys to talk amongst yourselves. Okay, what have we got? Has everyone got an area where they consider they can see functional dogmatism? What samples have we got from someone I haven't heard from to date? Functional dogmatism, what have we got? What's your name, sorry? Thanks, Jake. Great, so just getting that tunnel vision and that very clean focus when you need it. Wonderful use of dogmatism. Who else came up with a functional version of that for themselves? Who perhaps needs to add that to their desired functional list? So go on. Wonderful. Wonderful. Can everyone hear that? So it's with parenting, being dogmatic about the rules such that the boundaries are clear for the kids. Yeah, so consistently on the same path allows the kids to know where the boundaries are, and then they can start to relax into them, and once they can follow the boundaries, then we can let go of the dogmatism, theoretically. Thank you for sharing. Good personal example. One more? Great, I hear what you're saying there. So you're probably up with a bunch of people who use dogmatism relatively functionally for that group of people, and you can actually get in there and bounce quite strongly. So people who run businesses, you're going to be more dogmatic, generally speaking, than the average bear, whether you like it or not. Why? Because you stood up and you said, I'm going to run my own business. So if you're looking to grow your business as well and in mastermind groups, etc., then you're going to be in with even higher caliber of people, as you say, or more dogmatic and more strongly, happily dogmatic people, and you're all happy to butt up against each other, yeah? But the average person doesn't have a strong dogmatic streak such that when you bring your straight line thinking in, it just runs all over their thinking, yeah? So it will help you a lot to soften, and you'll see that perhaps in the next session. Look out for position 3. I'm just going to sort of throw it out there now. Good, so it's making a soft version of that, yeah? So good thinking with a softness where you can sort of feel where they're up to, yeah? So you can bring them along in your toe rather than sort of roll over them and then bring them along. Good, I like your thinking. Has everyone got a list, one side, something written down that they do dysfunctionally and a functional version of dogmatism? If you haven't done that already, I'd just like you to make a note. What have you become aware of? So dysfunctional will be on the left and functional will be on the right. Yes. Dogmatism in crisis is very good as long as you're the right person to be dogmatic. Yeah, so it's knowing that you're the right person in that situation. So anyone who just knows what to do and takes control in a crisis situation, perfect time for dogmatic thinking. Next level of thinking, just as you're... a couple of you still writing. Next level of thinking is the diligent thinking. It's more flexible in terms of, with diligent thinking, show me the steps 1, 2, 3, and I'll do them as requested. So diligent thinkers can be great team members as long as the processes are relatively consistent and they're not going to change that much, which of course in the evolving world that we're in, both dogmatic and diligent thinking, they need to be used. If we're talking about a meal, these things need to be more pepper and sauce rather than the steak. So the lower levels of thinking, we want them and we want to be able to do them well, but we don't want them to be baseline thinking. So diligent thinkers, they follow the process. The worst thing for a diligent thinker is making a mistake. So they would prefer to do nothing rather than risk making a mistake. And the reason for that is they're very externally driven, as is a dogmatic person, so they're worried about what the external world looks like, and if the external world is in order and I'm doing the right thing, then I get to feel good within myself. It's a key theme that we're going to look to flip. So the lower levels of thinking are all logic-based, which are externally based. So diligent thinking, it is probably the biggest group of thinkers that would place themselves into the diligent thinking bucket, but it's the one that I would like you to use well. It's actually probably my least preferred level of thinking, and that's to my detriment, I would say. So a good dose of diligent thinking is good, but more as a backup. Talk to me. Dysfunctional styles of diligent thinking might just do this as a big group. Dysfunctional styles of diligent thinking, who's witnessed that? It doesn't have to be you. Great. If it's not written in the procedures or it's not in my job role, then I don't have to do it. It's dysfunctional dogmatic thinking. So I'm only going to do what I've been told to do. Perfect example. And accounting industry, any logical industry, more likely to be, there's more likely to be diligent thinking in that industry because the rules are very clear. Who's got another example of diligent thinking? Dysfunctional diligent thinking. Lovely. So teaching our kids that they have to do things correctly. There's a book called Mindset by Carol Dweck. If you haven't already read it, the first 3 chapters, the rest of the book I'm not so fussed about, but the first 3, in fact, we give it to all our clients and I've never read the whole book, but the first 3 chapters are wonderful. After that it gets a bit airy-fairy, in that she's sort of making things up a little bit. But when we teach our children that they need to get the right answer all the time, instead of teaching them just to have a bash, so let's be diligent about the right things. Okay, so we're flipping across to functional diligence here. It's good to be diligent about the idea of it's okay to make mistakes. And not just to think that, but to really feel the truth of that. Anyone who's looking to do the right thing all the time is going to be very stuck in life because we need to make mistakes to learn and grow. Any other examples of functional diligent thinking? Data entry is functional diligent thinking, but once again it's going to be sort of part of the past. Yeah, anything that's repetitive, AI is going to gradually take over. Diligent thinking in terms of doing the right thing by our partners, this is good. Yeah, so I'm going to tick the boxes that I feel I need to tick, but correct, staying within the boundaries. It helps groups come together when we're diligent. If everyone thinks that diligence is irrelevant, then a group will quickly disintegrate into chaos. Okay, so so liked is a very subjective term. I would say diligent thinkers are less disliked. Often the more liked people are the people who are outside of that, and people sort of gravitate towards them because they're not bound by the constraints of the masses. Good? Perfect example, wonderful example, bookkeepers, yeah? So the diligence makes your books nice and solid, but who's ever had a bookkeeper and thought, you're not actually the tax office? Do you know, like, just put it in the category. I'm very sincerely good with my taxes. Okay, so that's, yes, diligence has its place. Okay, on to determined thinking. Determined thinking is the next level in terms of flexibility. So a determined thinker actually has sort of a diligent underpinning in that they appreciate the importance of steps 1, 2 and 3, and if I just do X, Y, Z, and if I just come to a business course, then my business will be successful. The difference with a determined thinker compared to a diligent thinker is they are willing to make mistakes because they know that doing nothing is worse than doing something and getting it wrong. Okay, so a determined person hates to do nothing. Once again, they're still very externally driven because a determined person doesn't want to be seen to not be able to do something. So there's almost this compulsion to keep moving and to keep growing and to keep learning. Who's ever felt that compulsion? I was driven by it to the point of distraction. So, determined thinking. When does determined thinking become dysfunctional? Burnout. Great. Yeah, so they become tired and they end up at the next level of thinking, diagnostic, when that happens. But it's not sustainable, determined thinking. So, perfect there. Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful. I was just read my mind, so thank you. Determined thinking in the business, so I'm going to drive so hard in the business for my family that I forget about my family. So, you know, there's classic stories of people finally becoming successful and then their family is no longer around them, or so disconnected that they're wondering why they did it at all. Okay, you can have other people, so we have when I go through things like this, I think of our classic sort of people that we've worked with. Had one very successful man work with us, and he basically came to us because his wife said, either you go and get your stuff sorted, or I go. So very successful in one regard, and he was happy, dogmatic and determined. Okay, she was not. So determined thinking has its limitations. And then on the opposite side, we have people who, a couple who are very determined and close together because of their determination, but putting that determination into a business that just wasn't going well. So determined thinking in its negative aspect is when you keep trying to flog a dead horse, yeah, instead of taking the feedback. I said I would do this, and so I'm going to make it work, even if it kills me. Just have a chat amongst your table. Focus on the determined aspect, what you do functionally and dysfunctionally, and just write those down sort of as you chat. But also what I would like you to do is just talk about which of those 3 levels you most rely on. Are you more a determined, a diligent, or a dogmatic thinker? And once you've answered it for yourself, if you're brave enough, and I say if you're brave enough, you do not have to do this, ask the rest of your team, your table, what they think you are. How are you perceived by others? As you're talking, I encourage you to diligently make some notes for yourself, because the theory is lovely. The ability to apply the theory to yourself and to really feel into how the theory affects you and gives you insights into yourself, that's where it actually becomes useful. Okay, has everyone got functional and dysfunctional determined noted down, and functional and dysfunctional diligence? If you haven't got something written down for every square, just highlight the diligence thing, because you're not very diligent. So for those of you who have not got something written in every square, highlight, put a circle around the word diligence. It is. Put a circle around diligence. She'll weak point. Okay, how have I done that? Oh, I don't know. As long as we've got one, then we're good. Okay. Sorry, I've forgotten your name. Nikki. Good name. Nikki correctly said before that if we're determined, in fact, any of the lower levels, if we're overusing our logic, so all the lower levels are based on logic. Okay, it's based on how we think. So if we overuse thinking, we will eventually become tired, drained, cynical, resentful. We will find fault with others. We will play the blame game. So anytime we're overusing logic, we'll end up in the diagnostic space. There's two ways to end up in the diagnostic space. The first one is looking back and looking to the side and going, I don't understand how I ended up here. Why is that, doof ahead of me and doing better in business? Or why is that lazy bugger ahead of me and going better than I am? Or if you're a very introverted person, why aren't I as far ahead as I thought I would be? So it's that, what have I done wrong? Sort of diagnostic approach. And what happens is, when people have that diagnostic thinking and they're sort of trapped in the lower levels of thinking, is they will want to shift their thinking. And this was very much myself. I knew I needed to shift my thinking, but when I got to the diagnostic stage, I ended up looping and just thinking, if I create another plan or I do something different or I go to a different industry, then I'll be successful. So it's a very external type of solution. So it must be not me, it's something outside of myself. And that's often what happens with anyone in the logical realm. There'll be a logical reason outside of themselves as to why they're stuck. If we look at diagnostic in the more positive aspect though, diagnostic is, what do I need to do differently? So here I am, for whatever reason. It's sort of useful to look at the past, but only to get a quick snapshot of what I know I've done. And when I go into the future, the one thing that I need to do, if I'm not exactly where I'd like to be, is I know that I need to do something different to what I've done in the past. So we're only looking to the past to work out which aspect we'd like to do differently in the future, with a lightness. So the negative version of diagnostic is once again that logical, it's my fault, I'm not a good person type of concept. But we want to go above that and go into, it's not my fault, I'm a good person, and I'm able to go into the expansive space. So expansive thinking is the ability to ask the question, what else? So what else could I do? And a truly expansive thinker will always come up with at least 3 options. This will sound a bit contrived to start with, but pretty much no matter what you do and when you do it, you will always know that there's a million things that you could do, and you're going to come up and logically land on at least 3 options. One option is always to do nothing. Another option is to do what you're going to do anyway, and the third option as a minimum. Now, the more options you come up with, the more expansive you are. And I think the key to an expansive thinker is they are able to do nothing for what feels like an illogical period of time. And a lot of people who rely on logic and those lower levels of thinking can't hold the tension of doing nothing. So when you run back in and go crazy with your team members, it's that determined aspect coming through rather than expansive. Okay, I'm going to just sit with it for a little bit longer, hold the tension, and do nothing for what feels like a crazy period of time. But when I choose to do something, it'll be something that feels good for me and those around me too. Okay? So if you come up with at least 3 good logical options, the thing about logic is you can pretty much logic into things. So you just need 3 options that you like. Okay, so it's not, are they logical? And we have to get an accounting degree to work out if it's logical or not, or an engineering degree. We come up with 3 options that seem good to us as a minimum. And we know that we can justify any of those options dogmatically and diligently if we need to. Once we've got 3 options on how we could proceed, we then have the chance to become embracive in our thinking. And embracive is actually the ability to feel into the option that feels best to us. So you'll notice here I'm not saying decide or think. So someone mentioned that they're here to make good decisions. So this is the key to good decisions, okay? Good decisions are about coming up with a number of good logical options, not just one. A lot of people are lazy in their thinking. I call it lazy logic. They'll come up, there's only one answer, one way to solve this problem. There's never, ever, ever only one way to solve a problem. There's a million ways to skin a cat. There are a million ways to solve every single problem that you have. And when you create enough of them that you've got choices in your brain of different areas that you can go to, then you're able to become embracive, and embracive is to go, I've got option 1, option 2, option 3, which one feels the best to me? And here's the thing about feelings, it's illogical, okay, so brace yourself, those thinkers. Which feeling do I care about today? Happiness, good, which one makes me feel more happy? This one, great, I'm going to do that. Which one makes me feel more energized? Oh, it's not that one, it's this one, so great, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to feel good about doing that. So for those of you who are tired, you're doing what you think you should do rather than doing the logic to come up with a number of different options and then choosing an option that feels good to you. Take a minute to chat to your table. What are you hearing? How does it apply to you? Okay, talk to me. What are we discussing? What of gentlemen over the back coming to you? If you haven't spoken to me, I'd love to speak to you in the next couple of minutes. What are we talking about, guys in the back table? What have we got over there? What have you come up with? How do you relate to it? No right or wrong answer in this room. Wonderful. Good. I think that showing up in the room is a sign of expansiveness, and it's a sign of someone saying, I don't naturally and easily do it myself, so I'm going to put myself in a room and then I can sit and be a little bit more passive. So it's a wonderful way to become more expansive, to meet new people. So simply by sitting at a table with people that you don't know, or meeting someone during the breakouts that you haven't spoken to, you're forcing yourself to become more expansive, and that brings in new ideas. So I love that. These rooms are perfect for that. You know, it's an effortless way to become expansive, and it forces you to be expansive in ways that you wouldn't have otherwise thought. So you wouldn't have thought to come and talk to me, but here I am because Steve said, Nikk will be good for you guys, yeah? Good job, Steve. What else have we got? Yes, thanks, Phil. Great, you're going to like session 2. Okay, so session 2 talks about white and black thinking. So we work with logical levers. So white is, this is the way I do it, I like it, I'm not going to change it. And black is a totally different way of thinking, but open to other options. So how do you, being a black person, come and connect with someone at white, yeah, and get them across to black? So we will go through that, okay? What else have we got over in the back far corner? I like the far corners. Oh. Wonderful. Just as a summary to this section, I'll go through a couple of patterns. People who are above, who sort of naturally sit in that expansive and embracive space, versus people who sit below the line more naturally. So there's no right or wrong here. All 7 levels of thinking are required to run a successful business and to have a wonderful life. But if we over-rely on a couple of levels, then we cycle in the idea of having either good ideas and going nowhere with them. Who's been in that bucket? That was my expansiveness used to be in bed at night, yeah. Because it's very easy to be expansive if you don't have to do anything, but the embracive bit, try, and then if I fail, I don't do anything, yeah. So I stop. So there's a couple of key patterns, and one is the pattern of I'm stuck below the line and I just keep looping in my logic, and the other pattern is I can get above the line and I start to what we call consciously evolve. And conscious evolution does require an element of determination, diligence and dogmatism to ground the ideas. But you have an idea, you embrace it, you actually go out and implement it. But someone who's above the line and who's doing it functionally will embrace it, knowing that if it fails, it's okay. I just drop back to the diagnostic level of thinking rather than making it all about me. You know, I'm just trying to do something in the external world. Here was an internal idea I had, and I had 3 of them, and I chose this one because this one felt the best to me. So I'm just going to implement it, see if it works. If it works, fantastic. I'll become evolved in terms of the problem that I had, which I needed to create ideas for, it's solved. Yeah, so evolved is just when we've elevated our thinking such that we had a solution that we didn't know how to solve it, and now we can solve it. And you'll notice you'll have evolved as business owners. Perhaps when you first got your team member, what do I say when they first come in? How do I onboard them? You know, there's all these questions that run through your head as a newborn business owner. And for those of you who have children, first time you have your first child, there's heaps of things that you don't know. But by the time you have your second team member and your second child, same, you will find that you will evolve, and the problems that you had in the first one aren't around in the second issue. So we're constantly evolving, and what we want to be able to do is do that faster and faster and more easily as the world evolves. So that's what we're going to do in the second session. We're going to look at an internal evolution process. So yes, we need to do things differently in the external world, but in order to do things differently in the external world, this is nice awareness, okay, but I'm not actually telling you how to shift thinking. So what we're going to do in the second session is look at what does it look inside you when you're stuck in dogmatic thinking, and what does it look inside you? What does it look like inside you when you're being expansive and embracive? Okay, sound like a plan? Great, thanks for your participation in the first session, and look forward to chatting to you over the break, and come back ready to work in the second session. It's a little bit deeper.
Wonderful. Big round of applause for Nikk.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you.